here in the chat. I'm glad you guys are warming it up for me. I'm glad to see that. It's always good to be here. I always start these out before I get into anything else by saying that I want to thank everybody for taking their time, such a valuable, precious commodity these days, time, and spending a little bit of it with me. Whether you're watching this live or in the rerun, I want to say thank you so much. It's always greatly appreciated, always will be. Who we got here? We got Scott, we got Maddie, we got Ben. Hey, gentlemen, how you guys doing tonight? Um, an epibotomosa. Yeah, I had the epibotomosa myself, as I seem to recall. Um, it was a nice guitar. I think the thing that got to me was the vibrato system on the vibro system on it, something. But actually, that wasn't too bad either. It was a good guitar. And by the way, last live stream, I'll start this out by going back a little bit and clarifying something. With that Candy Apple Red Telecaster made in Mexico Telecaster that I had. I really like that guitar, as you guys know. So if I came across that I didn't like it or I thought there was something wrong with it, that was not my intention. Actually, frankly speaking, it was a beautiful guitar. And what made me mad again, in the theme of last week's last chat's discussion, we were covering fenders and their price hikes and how that's affecting dealers, and it just pissed me off how I got lowballed on it. And I thought it was worth it. And I still think that it's worth far more than I ended up getting for it. And it kind of soured me a little bit from dealing with made in Mexico guitars, and I think it really has a lot to do with the price hikes. But I want to clarify that because that came up to me, and I want to clarify that that's not the case. Um, and also that I have a live stream, of course, every Wednesday and Sunday night, Sunday at Mike's. But I announced in my post that I'm going to be doing regular content as well this week. I didn't get to it today, guys. I'm sorry. It's been just a hectic week for me. The last 3 days have just been go, go, go. And so I didn't get to editing it yet. So I will edit that tomorrow and hopefully get it out tomorrow. We'll see. But either way, that will be coming up. And I'm basically discussing that video about how to identify the older Greco guitars. It's interesting to me, even online, when you go to look for information on the Greco guitars, it generally starts from 1976 on. Anything prior to 1976, you're really going to have a hard time digging things up. And I had a lot of research I had to do to dig things up to prepare that video and to help people going forward in the future if you are interested in Greco guitars, uh, particularly the Strats. It's going to help you identify things, to make sure it's all original, first of all. And second of all, to make sure that you're what model it is, because that's a little confusing as well. So we're going to get into that this week. When I get to it, gentlemen, I shall edit it. And yeah, hey, Sky L, I'll say hi. Sure, no problem. Mr. Watson in the house. How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you, sir. Good to see all you guys. Good to have you guys here on Wednesday. I hope your week has been good. I hope it's been far less hectic than mine. I really do, because this was it's been and continues to be. But hopefully, as we go into the weekend, it'll slow down. We had a holiday here on Monday, and it just seemed, and it just seemed like the last, okay, well, I was working on Monday a little bit, but it just seems like the last 2 days they tried to squeeze, 2 days into one. Especially on Tuesday, they were trying to squeeze Monday's work into Tuesday as well. It's just been one of those weeks, and everybody had a sour face too. I don't think you can have that 3 day weekend and come off of it, feeling hunky dory. I've seen no evidence of that yet. But, anyway, I digress. So tonight, we're going to be talking about something I've been seeing a lot lately: reverb listings with wild prices that don't reflect reality. This is going to continue on with my series talking about vintage guitars, particularly Japanese, made in Japan vintage guitars. And one of the things that's been coming up lately is, well, actually, where this all started was a discussion that I was having with one of my buyers. And he was saying, hey, Mike, you know, I I've been just looking at the prices of things, and what they're asking on Reverb and what they're actually going for are two different things. And I said, yes, I keep an eye on that. I actually keep data on what things are actually selling for when I'm basing upon what I'm pricing to you. But certainly there is a ceiling to these things. And I think that there's some people out there that are trying to make Japanese vintage guitars into the next, vintage market or sub market. I'll say I don't know vintage sub market in the guitar table. As I say, I compare YouTube to a high school, cafeteria, and you got your different cliques at different tables. And at the guitar table, of course, the king of vintage will always be the Fender and Gibson stuff. But I'm starting to feel that there's some forces out there that would like to see some of the made in Japan stuff now that it's getting into the 70s with, or 50 years old with some of this stuff to drive that up. So I want to talk about that tonight. That's kind of where the thought of this came from. Let me get into the chat here. Scott says, I need laser eye surgery, but I'm poor, so I figure I'd do it myself with an old CD player. Oh my God, Scott, please don't. Man, two hats, bank holiday in Amsterdam. Too many fun times to be had, I would imagine. No, it was bank, it was Pentecost. So, yeah, it was Pentecost on Monday. And, no, it was really chill actually. Everybody had a kind of a chill vibe because we had Friday and Saturday, well, Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So by the time Monday came, things were pretty deserted. And where I live at, everything shuts down. All the shops, all the stores, everything closes down. So, I had to get I had to hustle on Saturday to get my, I'm sorry, yeah, on Saturday, Friday, Saturday, I had to hustle to get my provisions, or if not, you're assed out. That's the truth. It's really funny going from a place like Japan where things are open 24 hours a day, and then the UK where they weren't. Let's see, Singapore. Yeah, Singapore, there were places you could go to 24 hours if you wanted to. Here, it's pretty cut and dry. Come 6, 7 o'clock. That's it, buddy. So, yeah, there's that. Well, I just think that I need to break down what's real, what's inflated, and like again, this goes for the guitar market in general. I just want to have a general guitar talk tonight. Nothing too deep. I'll be honest with you. I sat down to write the bullet points for tonight's script, and I didn't get very far because there's a lot in here. There's a lot of meat in here, but I didn't want to drag it on and get into tangents because this topic can get in there. It's not a very interesting one to most folks. So if you're hanging in there and you're watching, good on you. This one tonight is not going to be so salacious of a title, but it is helpful information. So there is that. So that conversation I had with my buyer really got me to thinking about tonight's subject because the way he was putting it is, I know he knows very well, but it was coming across like, hey, there's something, there's a divergence in the force going on here with these vintage made in Japan prices I'm seeing they're asking and what they're really going for. And there's, again, a lot of reasons for that. And I think you can extend this to, of course, 70s. We're talking about 70s guitars primarily tonight. You can extend this out to 70s Fenders and Les Pauls as well. I'm here for the Laurel Canyon talk. All right, we're going to get to a little bit of that tonight, but we also going to pay tribute to somebody here tonight later on as well. Alex, man, I just see in the news is like we're living a real life South Park episode. We, we need to go. We need to get back to the late '90s, early. Yeah, I agree. You know, L.A. is my hometown. My parents live there. My sister lives there. My niece lives there. And I just look at what goes on in L.A. and it's like it alternates between paradise and a war zone, and I'm afraid to say that the paradise parts are getting kind of slim. And so, yeah, dig that. The way he was putting it to me, getting back to this, is that subject is just his feeling that, in his very Dutch way, of saying, there's something going on there. Now, Reverb is not a price guide. And I think that a lot of people, we've talked about this before, but I think a lot of people make that mistake. They say, hey, you'll hear big, medium-sized dealers and other guys say this guy brought in a guitar and said, Reverb is asking this, and it's like Rick on Pawn Stars. I hate to keep bringing up Pawn Stars, but it's kind of the same situation when you're dealing with bringing stuff in like guitars, and they bring guitars into Pawn Stars as well, obviously. The reactions that you'll get from the dealers, and they generally say, well, that's great. I understand that's what people are asking. I'm going to tell you what they're actually going to get or what you're actually going to get. So there's that. On a brighter LA note, I heard they recently reopened PCH. Yeah. Yeah, there's a Malibu Colony. Inside Malibu Colony, there's a restaurant that I love. When I'm in LA, I will make the drive. Usually I try to stay out of, but I can't stay there anymore because that's gone to shit. I usually stay in Santa Monica. But I would take the half or 20-minute drive up to Malibu Colony up to PCH and go there and have breakfast at that place. And, I just had to be honest with you. And it's just amazing to me that the last time that I saw that is the last time that I'll see that, a lot of those places, a lot of those buildings. So again, I know you try to put a bright note on it, but I brought it right back down to Debbie Downerville. Now, I noticed that many listings sit unsold for months or years. I'm not seeing this in the Japanese market. The Japanese market, they price it to move. And if you're there in person and you got cash in your pocket, you could probably make a deal. They won't make deals online, but they will make a deal in person. And a lot of this stuff sits for months and years. And again, this is not just made in Japan stuff. And a lot of it sits for a long time. I know one dealer out of Osaka that I've been watching. He's for 5, maybe more, maybe 10 years now. I do believe, or somewhere within the last decade, at least, because I remember looking at his listings over when I was in Singapore. And I don't think he sold a single guitar. Not a single one. Maybe one. I reached out to him once, and he was just not budging. So they sit for years, multiple years. Some sellers just relist at a higher price over and over. You see a lot of that as well. And again, let's do a little history rehash and remind ourselves of a couple of things. Ben says, yep, the majority of crap I have on my watch list have been there a long damn time. Offers are frequent, yeah. And we'll get into the reasons, the psychology of the sellers in this point, what they're thinking, or some are. There are sinister forces afoot here. Not quite like Laurel Canyon, but where there's human beings, there will be people who are trying things. What actually sells? You know, what actually sells are the stuff that are trade-ins, cash deals, or like I said, Japan only listings that I deal in. They're in Japanese, they're on Japanese websites that you have to go deep and actually use a VPN to get to. And that stuff sells because they price it over there, and this includes even Fenders and vintage Gibsons from the 70s. You know, in yen prices, they price it to what they know they are selling at, and they're not looking at reverb to make. See, that's one thing. When reverb first came, somehow or another it evolved into the Bible of, you know, the guitar. You know, remember we used to have the little guitar catalog. You know, tell you the price listings and like the Guitar Blue Book, and Reverb somehow became that. But again, and also if you notice on Reverb, and they've changed hands, so God knows what the new portal is going to look like on that page when the new owners are done with it. But they had a period there where they did show, and you could easily on every listing, almost they showed what that particular listing was going for, and that's when it became useful because it would show you in a graph form over the course of a year. Well, for some reason in March, these had kind of a peak, but they're kind of falling off, and the average price of them is this. You gotta figure that out. And then all of a sudden, that disappeared, or at least they buried it so deep, I can't find it anymore. I'm serious. And I, I think that they buried it because, you know, there were forces that, you know, just like, you know, with movie reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, it seems that if Disney wants their movie to, you know, do great, they influence the reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes to give them a good review, when in truth, the audience score could be very low. It's a stinker. And there may be something similar to that going on with Reverb and why they hid the true, let's say, audience score on these guitars. Something to think about because they started hiding the audience scores on stuff on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a lot of correlation there. Was fascinating to me when, what movie was that came out? They first did that to maybe Little Mermaid or something along those lines. And I said, hey, you know, the same thing is happening over on Reverb, kind of in a funny way. Um, you know, so over in Japan, to make the point that on all their guitars in general, they have a good pulse as to what something is actually selling for, and they won't jack above that. It's only when those guitars leave Japan and get into the West that they start to get astronomical prices. And in some cases, it is indeed worth the prices that they're at. For example, today I was with the client that I'm talking about, interested in buying a pack of strings. And I went upstairs and took a look at the SE700 that I sold him. And the price that they're asking for it. And I think they're priced quite reasonably for that, considering that that guitar is every bit as good and made by Fujigen as any Strat of its time, which are going for twice as much in some cases. It's for the 80s, this late 70s Strats, maybe even three times as much. And the construction is the same, better done. It's one piece body, one piece neck. So, you know, it's just a five-way switch. So there's that as well. Let me catch up here in the chat before I start rambling on to the next part. Half of the real estate market are people just testing the market and not looking to sell. I imagine Reverb listings are similar, Scott says. Yes. Reverb claimed no special treatment for Fender, but I recently seen a Reverb ad that mentioned brands. first said was Fender, and no other manufacturer was mentioned. Yes, that's what I said. Again, Fender would be Disney in this scenario, and Reverb will of course be Rotten Tomatoes. And if they want to, kill some data, they can do that. Like I said, so it really was. It went to being a good market determiner to a great market determiner to just absolutely the wild wild west, just useless in terms of that. It's really useless. In that regard. Remember, your house or guitar is worth more than your dollar is worth less. Well, yeah, there's that. So YouTube can be an influencer as well. YouTube videos can inflate interest in a model very, very quickly. Very quickly, more so than Guitar World or Guitar Player or any of those magazines that I used to read back in the 80s ever could. And brands or sellers will ride that hype, even if the product isn't rare or exceptional. We all know of examples of that, stuff that got hyped up on YouTube that, not necessarily rare, but like, the, what was that? That monkey pedal. I forget, Funky Monkey. I'm sorry, I forget the name of that pedal that Josh over at JHS did not directly, but somehow or another, made into the in thing. That happens with the guitars as well. And so, guitar hype. We've covered a lot of different. Just I haven't really gotten into one of the points that I made about reissues and how that's a form of guitar hype, marketing hype. And I've touched upon it in the past, but that's another way. That's another way that they'll get you as well. They'll ride the hype on something. Well, such and such played this guitar. Okay, let's use Hendrix. So Hendrix played a 1968 Strat, outer body, maple neck with a maple cab. And of course, all the reissues after that are going to hype after that. And, I'm just using that as an example. John Mayer, PRS, or the PR Silver Skies or stuff, stuff like that. Things can get hyped on YouTube. Guitars can get hyped. And they're going to ride that hype wagon. So, I think that these days, because of that, you've really got to watch for things when buying. Let me catch up here in the chat. 100%, just one popular Autotunes video and a pedal will double in price. That's correct. Thank you, Johnny. How you doing, Johnny Dregs? Welcome to the chat. So glad to have you here, brother. Good to have you here. Yeah, I agree too. I'll co-sign on that cosign. I honestly think that, and they know it too. And they try. That's why what I call the game changers. Oh, this pedal's a game changer or whatever. And I always say, well, if that's a game changer, then your game was pretty weak to begin with. And it comes out every now and then, and they try, and they know this. But getting back to reverb prices, if you think that correlation between reverb and YouTube doesn't exist, believe me, it does. Because where do they run to? Facebook, I guess some people still use that, but mostly reverb. The bad monkey. The bad monkey is a good example of that. On reverb, on this day, at this moment, you can get a bad monkey for $23 all day. The following day after a YouTube video, it suddenly became a $300 pedal. And I'm not exaggerating those prices. And the Klon is example number two of that in terms of pedals, because I think that it was hype and it was a correlation of shops, YouTubers, that really drove the price of that thing up. You know, there's a lawsuit going on with that right now, but I'm not going to get into that tonight. Klon for sure, Scott. Yeah, see me and Scott. I didn't even see that, Scott. Yeah. Reverb cracks me up on listing. People think used items are equal to new prices. When you drive a car off a lot, I have no idea what that was, but that did not sound good. I was cleaning up here today and I did not put things away very well. Oh well, we'll figure that out at the live stream. When you drive a car off the lot, there is something called depreciation. When you take a new guitar out of the box, there's something called depreciation that occurs. And everybody seems to think that, you know, I saw that same thing, and I don't mean to get geopolitical, but I like making these real life correlations with these things because it drives the point home, I think, better for you if you can see other examples. And in China, within the last 15 years, real estate market was booming to the point where everybody and literally their mom's mom had a house or apartment, or they bought a place. And they bought it with the thought that the prices were always going to go up. Well, guess what? That's not how, markets work. And they are discovering that what goes up will come down. And if it goes up too rapidly, again, I can use the bad monkey because, you get it for 23, went to 300, now you can get it for 23 again. What goes up must come down. And I don't think a lot of people who buy guitars are aware of that fact. Is that when you start, into this game, this gas game, then you're going to have to expect a certain amount of depreciation, unless you're willing to go on the guitar safari and find those hidden gems. And who has time for that? Well, I do, because that's how one of the ways I pay myself every month is doing that. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So, there's that. JHS and Phil McKnight can definitely sway the masses. Absolutely. There's some YouTubers out there who have a lot of power to it, and that's why everybody's always hitting them up. And I really admire Phil McKnight because he says, "No, I don't want to do that because I'm not interested." He doesn't want to screw up his brand, by doing stuff like that. Now, two hats. I bought a Dumble because of John Mayer. Yeah, Joe Bonamassa traded a Dumble for a 1959 Les Paul, another 59 Les Paul. Now, he has other Dumbles, of course, but, that tells me that he valued that 59 over the Dumble. So, horses for courses. Music Companion, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. I scared Phil into not talking about who actually made the original Super Distortion. DiMarzio worked for a repair shop and was an assistant to Bill Lawrence and Kent Armstrong. Yeah, I believe that. I'm not going to really, DiMarzio and then him taking the patent out on double whites when double whites was something that existed before him. If that stream of behavior will tell you a lot about a person. And so I don't doubt that. Doing well, sir. Hope you guys. Yeah, Johnny, I'm doing okay. Just trying to make it through this Wednesday, this midweek hump. Got two more to go, and then it's Miller time. Mike, judo chops the desk in half. Ha! Sounded like someone dropped a spring reverb amp off a stage. No, it was actually one of these. One of my pick guards. I've got a couple of them propped up here. And that one wasn't propped up too well. Yeah, it landed on a bunch of cables. It'll be fine. It was cushioned. Phineas, welcome, Phineas, Mr. Henshaw. Welcome, sir. How you doing? Good to see you, sir. Things are only worth what people are willing to pay for it. Yeah, shaking my damn head. Yeah. Um, well, of course, that's what I always said. Price is the state, and value is the location. There's a lot of territory in the state, but finding that one location, that's what it's all about. And you got to find that one person who's willing to agree that that's the spot. Sometimes you got a line of people. Sometimes you got nobody at all. Most times you got nobody at all. It's a hard game. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be as gray as I am right now. Guitars are toys, Phineas says, unless you are making money with it. That's why I limit the price I pay for any guitar. No, that's part of the I'm good philosophy. Setting a budget and saying, hey, that's as far as I'll go. I'm a cheap bastard. I have expensive guitars roll through all the time, and all my guitars, I made one, and the other one is restored. It's okay. It's a vintage guitar, but still, I had to restore it, and I'm good. So yeah, that's limiting it too, and I'm happy with those two. I you know I found an amp today, guys. I wanted just a little small price. I've always wanted the problem with the Laney was too big. It was a 12. It was a 12. I want another 12, but even before I get a 12, I'd like to get a 10 inch. And so that I could sit it right here on my table, on my top here, and I can play stuff here live, and I can certainly use it while I'm recording as well. And I found a great, inexpensive amp that I'm interested in getting. Um, I bring it up because again, gas. And this one, it's a 10-inch amp and speaker, and I think it may work. That may be coming up here, but again, I'll limit the price even on something like that. There's only so much I'll spend on an amp. I've set a limit on it. And this one actually falls well under that. And I bet you, because it's at my client's shop, I bet you I can get a discount on it. So that may be it. We'll see. Man, two heads. I don't know. Real estate in Australia is 6 times the last 25 years. It would have to crash pretty hard to get back to 90 rates. Well, that is entirely possible. I had a very good friend, Australian friend of mine, when I stopped doing music in the late 90s in Japan. I wanted to stay in Japan. I wasn't rushing back to the States, so I got a job working for a magazine called Tokyo Day and Night. A good friend of mine, Justin, he was Australian. He married a Japanese woman, and he sold his condo in order to facilitate moving back to Japan because his wife was tired of Australia and wanted to go back to Japan. And he was hating life. I ran into him years later, and he said, "Mate, if I had kept that condo, it'd be worth 3 times what I paid for it." And I said, "I know, man. Now you're saying 25, because it's been over, well over a decade since I've seen him. So yeah, I know that. I know that firsthand. I don't make money from guitar, but guitar soothes my soul. That's priceless." Well, I agree with that. Again, one of the other reasons I'm good is because I like the guitars that I got. I'm good with the stuff that I have. I can make music. I'm working on music. As a matter of fact, I've decided that I'm going to slot off time next week where I'm going to finish working on some of the tracks for that third album that I'm planning. It's greatest hits album stuff, maybe some new recorded stuff and some outtakes and some other rock tracks that I like that were on other albums. But I do want to put new tracks on that. So next week I'm going to sit down and I've already recorded the tracks. I just had to edit and do the vocals and put my magic on it. But I'm good, and I want to get that Strat. I want to use it for guitar solo. And I think I will. Again, but I'm good with the equipment that I have. You I don't make money from doing music very much, but it soothes my soul. At least it gets it out, because if I don't, it just goes in my head. It plays over and over again, and if it has to be recorded. I've written enough. Actually, I started out, well, let me just write a few tracks to add to this, and I've written enough now, really, for an EP, 6 tracks. No lie, it just keeps coming. Um, you know, when a high price is a good deal, is real simple. I buy my stuff. Even that restoration SE that I got, it's all original. The back plate is original. The tuners are already established. It's a Fujigen, not Matsumoku made. All Everything on that. The only thing that was missing were 2 knobs were cracked, and I replaced those with Greco knobs from the same period. So it's all original, that guitar. And that is one of the things that I always look for. If you've seen my unboxings, you'll see how clean that stuff is. All original. You know, case candy is what I like to call it. Case candy. You open up the case and you look at that. It's just like open up your garage door and seeing, an Austin Martin, a late, early '60s Austin Martin sitting there. It's case candy. It's just something for the eye to see. Just another weird insight, well, not weird insight, but another insight into me. I told you I like those car restoration videos on Netflix and YouTube. I was just watching Counting Cars. And I forgot how much I loved that show, because boy, some of those cars on that show are just awesome. And but it also teaches you about buying something to restore, and the profit margin that occurs in that. Um, you know, and that happens. It's also with guitars as well. What it'll cost you with the shipping, and if you have a VAT, it's going to cost added, and what that comes out to in the end to determine the price on these as well, because there's where they're asking for it, and then you got to include the shipping, especially if you're buying it from Japan. If you're in the States and somebody's selling it, then if it's really high price, then the first thing that you're going to look at is for condition. I don't want to hear about we've upgraded it with DiMarzio pickups. No, the original XL pickups, or no deal. We've put on new. No, 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 no. I want every single solitary nut, screw, and bolt on that to be original, or replaced from original, if possible. And that's what you should demand as well. If it's not, if there's anything missing, then it's not worth the. And I'll tell you something. The thing that makes the Greco SCs, for example, valuable are the XL pickups. That's why you won't. When you do find them, you find somebody upgraded it. No, somebody took those XLs out, sold them on whatever Reverb, for an inflated price. Okay, and because there's a whole market for those as well, because there's guys who want to restore them. As a matter of fact, I've pointed out before that if you find a guitar, a vintage guitar, Fender, Gibson, Greco, whatever, from the 50-year-old guitar, and it's all in one piece, that means two things. It means either one, that the guy who had it really took good care of it, or it's not really a great player. And everybody just kind of, and that's the truth of it too. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And you have to be discerning on that as well. Yeah, it gets complicated. So, you got to kind of watch for that. You know, you got to kind of watch for that. Let me catch up here in the chat. Easiest way to make money with guitars is to sell them. Yeah, I can't argue that. Certainly not playing in the studios like I used to. I'll bet Car Hunters was good too. Yeah, yeah. Old Wheeler Dealers. Yeah. How often do you see Music Companion says, how often do you see good counterfeits? Well, I was a victim of a good counterfeit. So I've been dealing for 4 years now, professionally, and uh, I'm running, quite a few guitars through here every month, about 20, 25 to 30 a year. And I ran into one counterfeit. It was a Fender bass, and it fooled me. From again, only because I was looking at it from the pictures. And when I got it here and I unboxed it, you can see in one of my unboxings, I looked at it and I kind of said, "Oh, okay, this it's this," and and you can see me kind of like eyeing it, like, that's interesting. But I kind of put it aside and got to the other ones, but it was a fake. It was a fake. It was a head of fake. So my guy still wanted it, but for something he didn't want it to sell, not for sell, but wanted it for something else. And so I took a heavy haircut on that. I lost on that one, and that just taught me again: do your homework, do your homework, do your homework. If something sounds too good to be true, which was the case of that bass, I was like, wow, this guy's got one of these Fender basses, and he's only asking this for it. Oh, let me. It's a deal. If it sounds too good to be true, that's a red flag. That's a definitive, absolute, without any question, red flag. When there's a high price, I said it's a good deal if it's all original, rare color, case candy. When it's a high price, it's also a red flag. See, there's a duality there. I wish our friend in mental physics last discussion was here tonight. Threw that in. There's a duality there because it could be refinished, swap parts, no serial number, vague descriptions, a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, and cats don't know. I read, guys on the forums when I was researching my guitar. They're like, "Well, I've got this, and the seller says it's made out of pine and this, that, and the other." And I just wonder. I was like, take it 3 seconds. There are no Japanese Grecos from that period that were made from pine. They were all alder or sin ash. The cheaper ones were made out of basswood. So and so again, the descriptions can be wrong. There's a guy on Reverb. I pointed this out before again with a vintage made in Japan, just like mine, a 1974 SE50, and he's listing it as super rare. And I don't think that his prices that he's asking is not realistic for 74 350. He's asking, I think a couple hundred more euros than it's really worth. And I own one. And I'll never sell it, but I know what it's worth. That's my thing. And I think there are guys out there, as was pointed out earlier, that they don't really want to sell it. So now we're talking about the mentality of some of these guys. There are guys that are buying these, and they may, in his case, this one I'm talking about, he may have a business set up where he's a dealer of guitars, but actually all he's doing is just buying them and, half-ass putting them up for sale and putting the prices to a point where nobody really buy it anyway, and that's okay with him because he can churn. you know so there's a lot of guys that are like that out there as well. There's collectors out there who have huge collections, and they'll price it at, well, I'm comfortable at 15,000 on this. Well, it may only be, a $10,000 or $12,000 guitar, but he thinks it's worth 15, and that's his price. And every year he'll raise it, to match to beat the price of inflation on it. So there's that. Just a lot of things that you'll see. You know, and that duality that I talked about between when a high price could be a good deal or it could be a red flag. And by the way, a low price can also has a duality to it too. It can be a good deal or it can be a red flag. I have up here on the screen um, a reverb listing for a Greco. Let me see if I can get this up here. There it is. For a Greco here, that they're asking. This is a Greco EG 800 custom black from 1977. If you recall, I just had an EG 900 from 1977. It wasn't the custom, but it was the standard black. It was the 900. This is the 800. Mine was a 900. This guy is asking 21,000 US. I'm sorry, 2,100 US dollars, 2,150 US dollars for this guitar. And this is a good example of what I'm talking about overpriced. Uh, by far. It's kind of a sweet case, well kept, but that is not what this thing is worth. In Japan, you can find this guitar in this condition in the shops for about 1,200 to 1,300 USD with a case in Japan. You can find it. Okay. So again, this is just to kind of give you a sample of what I'm talking about, and in the sense that there are cats like sellers like these who are listing these guitars, and I'm seeing more of this. I'm seeing more and more of this all the time. Listings like this for these guitars at these prices, especially out of the United States. And this is the other, and I'll finish with this here. Um, I was alluding to this at the beginning of this discussion that I do believe, hey, Run Riot, by the way, welcome. And yes, it is too high. Uh, I just feel that there are forces out there that are trying to create a new submarket for made in Japan guitars. Are the quality great on them? Yes, absolutely. The Japanese were expert at making seamed furniture looks almost seamless. And they did that same thing with their guitars. That's why I have a 74 where you're not getting, with a pancake body, you're not getting that kind of separation that you're seeing on the 70s Gibsons and their pancake bodies because they didn't have the skills of furniture making first that the Japanese guitar makers, who were originally furniture makers, by the way, I talked about that. They didn't have those skills. And that's why 51 years later, that thing, until I got the 51 years of gun off of it, I didn't know that it was three-piece top, a pancake. I knew it was pancake, but three-piece top, I thought it was solid top, but it's 1, 2, 3 pieces on top of 1, 2, 3 pieces and pancake. And it's seamless, almost, you can't even see it. And so, again, yeah, that's great. They're made well. I bring that up just to talk about how much better they were made, but they're not, to this level. And yet I fear that this is the future for made in Japan guitars. Somebody once asked me what did I see as the future for, the next hot thing in guitars, and I said made in Japan guitars. And again, it's because of stuff like that. And you would think that this is an abnormality. It's not. This is not abnormal pricing at all for these on some of these on and then you see that disparity between what the Japanese are asking, because the Japanese list on Reverb too, and what folks like this are asking outside of Japan. So, in conclusion, really, honestly speaking, it's off the chart, and it's starting to get off the chart to the point where I just don't get it. I know, and I wonder if it's really going to work. I wonder if it's going to get there. Because Norm in Southern California in the early 70s, in a lot of ways, is the godfather of the vintage guitar market. And there is a Norm out there, who's the equivalent with these Japanese guitars, you know. I try not to contribute to that. I price my wholesale prices accordingly. And what the next guy sells it for is on them. But I am seeing that. So be careful of that. Don't overpay either. And a high price, yeah, it looks all original, it looks great. But here's a product where an example I showed you where a high price can be a red flag as well. You know. Very quickly, guys, before I get into our little dose of Laurel King, because I know a lot of you guys are enjoying that as much as I'm enjoying bringing it to you. I want to talk about a little bit of music history. I want to talk about the passing on the 9th of June, this last Monday, of Sly Stone. I refuse to not talk about him, especially in passing, because as much as Prince was an influence in my life, of course, because he's from my generation, it is without question that Sly Stone was a big influence on somebody like Prince. And I knew of Sly Stone's music, but I wasn't a teenager in the late '60s, early '70s. I was a teenager in the in the late '90s, '70s, and early '80s. I'm sorry, '80 on. And so it wasn't my thing, but it was Prince's thing because he was. And so, you know, when a guy, by the way, so Sly Stone was born in 1943, actually March 15th of 1943 in Galveston, Texas. And moved to the California and really set shop up in the Bay Area. The first original name for the group was Sly and the Stoners. I wish I had my stoner guitar back then. I could have sold it then. But Sly Stone was a multi instrumentalist. He was a guy who could play everything, mostly through church. We all, even I, went through church, playing in church and learning. And that development path led him to writing some wonderful songs and being um, like Stevie Wonder, also in his time period as well. Him and Stevie are contemporaries in that regard. But being more funkier than Stevie, if that's possible. You understand what I mean? I'm not, we're talking about, shades of gray here, so to speak. But Sly had a funkier thing to him, but they were contemporaries of each other. And I think that Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, a lot of jazz guys appreciated what Sly Stone was doing, and they mentioned them or worked with him. So I want to acknowledge his passing. Was he a perfect person? No. He had demons, But I find that most guys like him do have demons. Prince certainly had his demons. To a lesser extent, I'm sure I have my own, not drugs. I never had that problem. But I think that really he is somebody that if you haven't checked him out, or if you haven't checked him out recently, you should pay homage to him. My favorite Sly Stone song is "If You Want Me to Stay," because this is Sly Stone in the studio playing all the tracks, with a drum machine. He started out on a Maestro, by the way, the same makers of my old EP3 that I had, Maestro. Rhythm King as a drum machine, and then he built the tracks from that. Um, a habit that Prince got into. Prince got his Linn drum machine and built his. You don't listen to Delirious to give you a good example of building a track off of a drum machine rhythm. If You Want Me to Stay comes from Sly's last acknowledged masterpiece, the 1973 album Fresh, recorded mostly at the record plant in South Toledo, California. Isn't that interesting? When Prince got his record deal, the place that he immediately went to go record at, his first album was recorded at the South Toledo record plant because of that, because his hero, not just Sly, but also his other hero, Santana, recorded there. So he had to do his album there. So you can see how much of influence Sly was on him. Bunch of other engineers worked on it. Sly was the kind of an innovator. He was the track by track, build your record overdub style, a style that I adapted, and I learned that style from guys like Prince. I learned that that's how I still record. That's how my Uncle Carlton records. It's just a style from that, from my Uncle Carlton is a contemporary of Sly Stone, and it's just the way that Cat started doing it. And build your record overdub style. When I was working with Sly, he almost never tracked more than one instrument at a time, much like Prince. He really did it that way before most people. And the reason he could do that, even at that time, Stevie Wonder, when he was recording with most of the band there live. That's just the truth of it. And there, a lot of that stuff was, kind of live takes. They did overdubs later, but mostly. And the reason he could do that is he could play all the instruments himself, including drums. But sound familiar? I like Prince. And as I said myself, and John McKnight and a lot of other guys I grew up with. But usually he'd start out with a Maestro Rhythm King. He called it the Funk Box. It could do really simple stuff. It was like the I know that thing. It did stuff like you would expect from the 70s, like the Mamba or the Samba, like doom ticka doom ticka doom ticka doom, that kind of thing. But it gave him a foundation to work on, and then he'd build his record to the rhythm box. Sometimes he replaced it with real drums. I've done that myself, but on some tracks, including If You Want Me to Stay, the Funk's box is still there underneath everything. So go listen to that recording and you'll hear it. And he just let that ride underneath. So an innovator, if it wasn't for Sly to inspire guys like Prince, it would have inspired a guy like me. To learn how to play guitar, bass, drums, mandolin, ukulele. On my song Bottle Rocket, I took up ukulele. To play different instruments. And when I was in junior high school, I played the trumpet. But again, an innovator that's gone. And let me finish tonight this section talking about honoring Sly Stone is reading some of the lyrics to If You Want Me to Stay, because I think it's fit, apropos. If you want me to stay, I'll be around today to be available for you to see. I'm about to go, and then you'll know, for me to stay here, I've got to be me. You'll never be in doubt, that's what it's all about. You can't take me for granted and smile. Count the days I'm gone, forget reaching me by phone, because I promise I'll be gone for a while. And yeah, he's gone. Now he's gone. But I like that line, I love that. For me to stay here, I've got to be me. That about sums up a cat like Sly Stone, you know. And yeah, thank you, Scott. You guys should listen to that track. That's Sly Stone. Now the horns, he brought in his horn section to do those overdubs, but that's Sly on bass playing. You know, he funked up that rhythm box. You know, and the organ, all that stuff. Other than the horns, that's all Sly. So, you know, and I learned that's, you know, that and that was my goal. You know, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be like Prince. I wanted to be able to go into the studio who wanted to be like Sly. I wanted to go in the studio and do everything myself because it's a very intimate thing, first of all. You'll never see very much video footage of Prince recording. Just for the same reason, I can understand it because you're not going to see a lot of me either. It's a very intimate process, but you can get into it, you know. So there's that. Catch up here in the chat real quick. Hell, at some point I might just have to buy from you if all these guys keep jacking up the prices. Yeah, right, Riot. I always with you guys, I'll always hook you up. I'll get you as close to wholesale as I can get. Matty Two Heads, a true pioneer. Yes. I always say go see the legends live before they're gone. Tommy Mac, by the way, hello, sir. How you doing? Yes, I agree. Michael Watson, I recorded everything but drums myself. Yeah. You know, I stopped playing the drums, as you guys know. I still do drum over. I still have snares, and I still have a electric kit here. That's good for doing overdubs. That's the one thing that I won't play. I have no room for my drum set here anyway in this room, so it's not very practical. But I'm starting to think about going back to drum machines. To be honest with you, you know, and Michael, you know, that ability to do something that to be able to record everything yourself is not. You would think that everybody can do that, but it's not. It's more these days than when I was growing up, than when Prince was growing up, and certainly in the case of Sly Stone, there was nobody doing that. But it's still not as common as you would think, you know. And when I mean play, I mean really play. I'm not talking about using samples. I'm talking about play. Play the bass, play the guitar, play the keys, you know, play the drums. Where are we at with the Laurel Canyon? Let's read a little bit of Laurel Canyon. Let's get back into that. We've set a stage here. I've lost my page here, so let me scroll down here. In the previous chapter, every live stream, I will take a little bit of time to read a little bit of excerpts from the book Wild Scenes from the Canyon. Talking about Laurel Canyon in the early Los Angeles music scene. I come from Los Angeles. I know it very well. I worked in the Los Angeles music scene, but its beginnings were diabolical. There's no other way to put it. So let's talk about this. In the previous chapter, we met a sample of some of the most successful and influential rock music superstars who emerged from Laurel Canyon during its glory days. But these were, alas, more than just musicians and singers and songwriters who had come together in the canyon. They were destined to become the spokesmen and the de facto leaders of a generation of disaffected youth, as Carl Gottlieb once noted in David Crosby's co-written autobiography. The unprecedented mass appeal of the new rock and roll gave the singers a voice in public affairs. That, of course, makes it all the more curious that these icons were, to an overwhelming degree, as we've pointed out, the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex, and the scions also of families that wielded vast wealth and power in this country for a very, very long time. So there's that. And, you know, this narrative we discussed last time about, you know, how they merged the hippie movement into the anti-war movement, and they were really two different things. But here in 2025, on TV and stuff, they're often portrayed as the same thing. They were completely different. I have a TV show that I love called Ghost. There's a BBC version and an American version, and in it there's a hippie flower girl named Flower Child, interesting, not very imaginatively, named Flower, and she's anti-war and also hippie, and they've merged it, in the culture, and it's just like here, and it came from here because those were two separate things. So there was that. We covered that last time. Um, let's continue on. Where are we at? We talked about the murders that occurred over in Benedict Canyon, not but a stone's throw away of Laurel Canyon, the Manson murders. And the strange coinkydinks, that occurred even in that. The tie-ins. As Jim Gordon said, we're detectives now. We're not allowed to believe in coincidences. And the fact that the hairdresser to Jim Morrison was also one of the victims up there at the Manson murder house, Jay Sebring. I mean, and by the way, I'm reading the book, guys. I'm about to curse, but this is quoting a book. Fuck. He auditioned for Neil Young, for fuck's sake. This is Graham Nash, in typical Graham Nash fashion, as I understand from his personality, explaining to Michael Walker, the writer, how close Charles Manson was to the Laurel Canyon scene. I told you before, he was cutting demos with folks. By the way, Neil Young, is a sinister character in his own way. I hate to say it, but he is. There's a close tie-in between Neil Young and Rick James, the punk funk king, and that is interesting. You wouldn't think Neil Young and Rick James, yeah, they knew each other very well. As a matter of fact, when Rick came to LA after getting out of the Air Force, again, another military situation, the first place he headed to was Laurel Canyon, and the first person he went to go see was Neil Young. So during a 10-year period in Laurel Canyon, Lenny Bruce, Raymond Navarro, Sal Mineo, Diane Linkletter, Inger Stevens, Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojtek Funsky, Abiel Folger all turned up dead. And this is just a few of the people. This is a short list. Here's a little bit more numerous list. Marina Elizabeth Hab, for some reason, she body was carved up and tossed into a bush along Mulholland Drive. She was just 17 at the time of her death. She was the daughter of Hans Habe, who immigrated to the U.S. From Austria in 1940. He was part of the fascist government there. Shortly thereafter, Hans married a General Foods heiress. Gee, that's a lucky turn of events, because General Foods was one of the richest families in the world, in the United States at that time, and began studying psychological welfare at the Military Industrious Intelligence Training Center. After completing his training, he put his PSYOPs warfare skills to use by creating 18 newspapers in occupied Germany under the direction of the OSS. And yet his daughter ended up carved up because she was up there in Laurel Canyon. Christine Hilton was a girlfriend of David Cosby, and grew up at the Hamilton Air Force Base in Marion. So even their girlfriends, the girls that they went out with, were tied into this. This is a clique. This is a crew. And if somebody in the crew or something in the crew wasn't right, or somebody was deemed, maybe this might be a problem, loose lips. What's that scene in Goodfellas? Well, you never know. Should we shoot Sally? You won't talk. Yeah, well, you never know. You know, I could go through this list. Alan Blind Al Wilson from the Canned Heat. He was found dead, Laurel Canyon. Very, very close. Lived very close on Lookout Mountain Avenue, right next door to Joni Mitchell. Uh, help me. I think I'm dying. Jimi Hendrix occupied the sprawling mansion just north of the Log Canyon. Up there, Log Canyon is a very famous building up there that I do believe it was mentioned in this book that Zappa lived in, but Hendrix lived next door. 1968. Jimmy served a stint in the U.S. Army with the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell. His official records indicate that he was forced into the service by the courts, and he was released just 1 year when he reportedly proved to be a poor soldier. Okay? Okay. One wonders, though, why he was assigned to such an elite division if he was such a failure. Why was he in the 101st Airborne if he was such a bad? This is an elite group. This is not back in the day. The 101st Airborne was well known. These are guys who took a lot of property during World War II. Yet somehow Hendrix was in this group. If he was indeed such a failure, one also wonders why he wasn't subjected to disciplinary measures rather than been handed a free pass out of his, which was extensively court-ordered service. In any event, Jimmy himself once told reporters that he was given a medical discharge after breaking an ankle during a parachute jump. One biographer has claimed that Jimmy faked being gay in order to get an early release. The truth, alas, remains rather elusive. At the time of Jimmy's death, the first person called by his girlfriend was Monica Donovan. Last to see Hendrix alive was Eric Burden of the Animals. 2 years later, Burden had relocated to LA and had taken over a ring master duties in Laurel Canyon from Frank Zappa after Frank Zappa vacated the log cabin and moved into another Laurel Canyon home. Within a year of Jimmy's death, the girl who had been with Jimmy, a very beautiful, you ever see pictures of her? She was gorgeous. Devon Wilson, somehow or another, she took a header out of a floor window at New York's Chelsea Hotel in 1973. Burden was killed in a mid-air plane collision. By the way, Jeffrey Burden, his manager, had been funneling most of Hendrix's gross earnings into offshore accounts in the Bahamas linked to international drug trafficking. Maybe Jimmy started asking questions about where his money was going to, or maybe Jimmy was, you guys understand what I'm saying? Nothing is really, I don't want to throw this on him, but him getting out of the army is rather suspicious. His big burst onto the London scene is rather interesting. There were other black guitar players. Okay, he had something going for him, but anyway, you guys get my point. All of this stuff, everybody and everything that touches this Laurel Canyon scene always gets back to the CIA, OSS, military industrial complex or something. Hendrix was getting his money funneled into the Bahamas. This is a fact. And his death, maybe he was asking too many questions. And his girlfriend, I talked about her back in 96. She wasn't, by the way, broke. She was the daughter of a wealthy German industrialist. See, none of these guys dated poor chicks either. All their girlfriends were married to, were the children of somebody who was married to somebody wealthy. That's an interesting. Again, it sounds like a clique. It sounds like a clique. It's a clique. It's a group of people. Jim Morrison. You all know about him. After Jim's death, his common law wife Pamela dropped dead suddenly as well from a heroin overdose. Like Hendrix, Morrison had been an avid student of the occult. I never mentioned that, but by the way, just like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix was. Listen to some of the lyrics of his song. It's there. There's esoteric language in there, and also Morrison. He had a fondness for Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley is going to come up in this discussion a lot, a great deal. If you don't know who that is, figure it out. According to super groupie Pamela Des Barres, he read all he could about incest and sadism. And also, like Hendrix and Wilson, Morrison was just 27 at the time of his possible death. He just, who's really buried there? Did he disappear? That stuff happens. So I'm gonna stop there. But and I've named two famous people directly associated with questionable past, questionable people all around them. And again, like I said, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I didn't know until I read this book about Jimi Hendrix and his occult leanings. The fact that he studied the occult a great deal. Now, some of us, I know I have. I can't say that I haven't studied occult, in some cases very deeply. As a matter of fact, I still do, but not from a sense that I want to participate in it, but from a sense of I want to know this bullshit so that when I see it, I can call it out for the bullshit it is. Actually, it's not bullshit. There's power behind it, but you understand what I mean. It's better to what do they call it? Inoculate yourself, a little bit in order to prevent getting the disease. So I like to inoculate myself. But these guys were seriously into it. I didn't know that about Hendrix. I knew, some of the British rockers were heavily into it. I had no idea about Hendrix, and some of Morrison's tastes were questionable at best. These guys were interesting cats. So we can see that there was a whole lot going on. Neil Young is curiously like a father figure to Eddie Vedder. See, those tentacles still reach out to this day, by the way, guys. Lucky Penny Collectibles. Yep, I noticed that the savings are not as common as they'd like us to think. I do Amazon for less than the same new thing and gain points for my next purchase. Reverb is good for hard to find items. Yeah, I agree with that. Jimmy was the first black paratrooper in U.S. history. Okay? Triple nickels. Hey man, it's an easy way to get into generational wealth. Yeah, marry into it. Funniest thing about Aleister Crowley is that magical duel where he got kicked down some stairs by W.B. Yeats. Yeah. Again, Yeats. Yeats, however you want to pronounce that, depending upon where you're from. Really, honestly, guys, a lot of weird stuff out there. A lot of weird stuff. And I enjoy bringing these discussions to you guys and pointing stuff out. We'll get more into this in the next live stream. Triple nickels were all black American paratrooper division in the 1940s. Well, my grandfather, Alfred E. McWilliams, was part of the Tuskegee Airmen. He was a chaplain to the Tuskegee Airmen, the first black aviators. My father, Stanley Wilmax McWilliams, was one of the first 16 black airline pilots. There were 16 guys, 16 black pilots that were chosen, the first in the United States as well. So again, and I'm familiar with that concept. But Hendrix situation, because I know the military pretty well, because again, I tell you, I'm not full disclosure. I do come from a military family, and when I worked for Stars and Stripes, I had the rank of second lieutenant. I will, admit that. But that's another story for another time. Um, I think that, at least on my ID card, uh, I think that there's a lot of weird stuff there, guys. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It's a rough ride finding out your musical heroes are all sociopaths. Yeah, yeah. And that would be a good thing. It's a rough ride. Yeah, yeah. Second lieutenant, nice. Yeah. That's because you have a college education. So if you get a job, even if you're a civilian contractor like I was, and you get in a position working with the military like I did in Japan for a little while there, because I told you I went out of music. So I was applying my college degree, and I get the rank of second lieutenant. But I never tested it, and believe me, I wasn't going to ask any of those regular guys to try to see if it worked, if they'll salute me. But it did open some doors for me for a little while there. Um, you know, that's it for tonight, guys. I want to thank you so much for tuning in and watching this live stream all the way through. I think that we have some food for thought. So if you haven't watched this all the way through, go back and watch it again. Watch it twice, three times. But while you do that, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. I really would love to have you join this crew we got going here. I got the best crew on YouTube. We're a small group here, but damn it, we're here all the time. It's like clockwork. And I love it, man. I love it. It's one of the reasons it keeps me going. Scott, thank you. Maddie, thank you for guys for being the mods tonight. I want to thank everybody else for showing up, new and regulars alike. I'm going to go in here and pour myself a bowl of cereal. Because for some reason, I just felt like a bowl of cereal. No, I'm not stoned. It's just for some reason I'm hungry, and that's the lightest thing well, maybe some yogurt would be better. Anyway, we'll see. I could use the bran. I could use the fiber. But that's a story for another time. I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. You guys take care, and I will see you a Sunday at Mike's. Until the next, and I will have a regular content video coming out this week, tomorrow or the next day. You guys take care. Bye bye.